Hello, welcome to my Last of Us Season 2 video essay. A couple things to start off. How's this camera angle? I was writing myself like a rough draft script, and it came out so entirely long. I knew I had a lot to say, but oh my god, I did not think it was this much. So I actually am kind of reading from a script. So I tried to move my camera over a little bit more to the center of my desk so that I'm not just looking totally over to reference my script. I think this is about as good as it's gonna get. I hope you don't mind. On top of that, I am a Rottweiler mommy of two. If you hear demon noises or chewing or thudding or objects like 100 pounds of muscle are running into walls and stuff, they probably are. Disregard. They're very rambunctious, so we'll see how that goes. So I just want to start this off saying a couple things actually about the topic, not just about my household and my camera angle. I'm going to be referencing that I have talked with other people for their opinions while gathering all of these opinions, and really what influenced me to make this video. These are all people who played the video games. All opinions and input are from myself and other people who have played both games. So, these aren't just opinions out of thin air. They're from people who, know what I'm going to call the canon story. So there's a couple times where I will refer to something as canon. Given the TV show is technically canon. When I say canon, I mean canon to the games. Okay? Yo, if you couldn't tell by the content or the title and what we're discussing, this is full of spoilers. Full of them. Like, absolutely full of them. So, do with that what you will. So, yes, I have played both games of The Last of Us. I vividly remember being a young teenage girl and dragging my dad through pawn shops trying to find a copy of The Last of Us. And when we finally found it, there was hundreds of games, and they were all $5 or $10, and there was a single copy of The Last of Us, and it was $25. And I'll never forget that. My dad was like, this game's $25, all these other games are like $10. I'm like, Dad, it's a really good game, I really need it. He got it for me, of course. I think I was like 14 or 15 years old at the time, which I believe is just semi-relevant, because I want to tell y'all just like the reason that I even have so many opinions and why this game is so important to me is that I played The Last of Us Part 1 as like a 15-year-old girl, and Ellie is a 14-year-old girl in that game. I related to Ellie, and I found so much comfort in her character as a bisexual young teen. She's very important to me. The series is very important to me, but she's very important to me. And that's also why I feel so strongly about some of these things. And yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. A couple other things to start before I get into dissecting this, because that's pretty much what this is, a dissection. There is unfortunately, there is inevitably going to be comments about Bella Ramsey's appearance if this video even gets views. I'm hoping so. I'm putting a lot of effort into it. This script took me like 4 or 5 hours to write in total, getting all my thoughts down and stuff. So there's inevitably going to be comments on Bella Ramsey's appearance. And it's not okay. It's not fine. But I do not want arguments to break out in the comments section. I don't want to have to babysit them. I just want to say ignore it. Don't feed the trolls. It's inevitable. If you're on Facebook or anywhere where people are talking about The Last of Us as a series, it doesn't even matter what you're talking about or if you bring up Ellie as a character at all. There's terrible, terrible, terrible comments. We're just going to ignore them because we're better than that. Okay. Start off by saying that season 1 was just absolutely phenomenal. I think overwhelmingly between both TV only fans and game fans, it had just an absolutely wonderful. It was breathtaking. It people were in love. Like, people who didn't play The Last of Us 1 or 2 were now excited for season 2. Like, it was great. The things that made it great were the attention to detail, and capturing the magic and just everything about The Last of Us game into a TV series. And it was really one of the best seasons of not only TV, but one of the best adaptations of a video game that I think we have seen in such a long time. Specifically, I want to bring up episode 3, because episode 3 just really enhanced the story of Bill, and it further engaged in the representation that we all love as Last of Us fans. The story is extremely radical, and if you think otherwise, you're not paying attention. And so much of episode 3 was controversial for people who didn't pay attention, or people who it kind of went over their head in the game. And I don't blame them. And this is not to critique the game and say you could have done better, but it went over a lot of people's head. Joel and Bill are walking around his town, and you see somebody, we'll say, swinging from the chandelier, because I don't exactly remember how strict YouTube guidelines are. And Joel's like, "Who is that?" And Bill says, "My partner." And a lot of people either thought of my partner as somebody he was just surviving with, or it just completely went over their head. So episode 3 really, like, it character built, it world built. It was a phenomenal episode of TV, and it just did, it's beautiful. Like, people still reference it to this day. It is one of the best gay love stories that I have ever seen. A lot of the major complaints for season 1 were a lack of infected. That is honestly the biggest and only complaint that I still see to this day. People didn't really nitpick the series as far as season 1 went. They really just only said, "I wish there were more infected. I wish there were more action." Now, I do want to say that, yes, that's important, but a lot of good zombie or infected media isn't just about the zombies and infected. And even if we think back to The Walking Dead, what makes The Walking Dead good is not just the zombies coming after them, the walkers. But at the same time, there is a really, really fine line that you need to walk between battling these infected and all of that action and the stories of humanity that make this series so good. In later seasons of The Walking Dead, people do drop off, and a lot of it is not because of the story in itself. It's because they're bored. It became too much drama, not enough action, not enough involvement of the walkers. And, you know, I don't blame people for that. Again, I think it's a very fine line to walk. So before we start dissecting the episodes, because I am going to do this kind of going through each episode, I do want to say it's May 20th right now. So episode 6 did in fact come out. That's where we're at. I wrote this before episode 6 came out. I'm going to read it as it's written and then add in my little addition about episode 6, where it should go in the script of things. But I also want to talk about some casting choices. And again, given the disclaimer that I put at the very beginning of this video about the appearance of Bella Ramsey, that's not what I'm talking about. I wanted to talk about some of the choices, particularly in taking away Abby's build. And again, I don't want to sound shallow, because I don't want to be like these people who are just constantly talking about Bella Ramsey's appearance. But not only are we taking away Abby's appearance, but it's taking away her plot. It's taking away her character. Abby trained for 4 years, which resulted in her being high up in Isaac's army, which is a major plot point for her story and her character. She got away with going what I'm going to call semi-AWOL because she was crucial to Isaac's team. There's no other reason that Abby was able to do everything Abby did, go missing for days, and people weren't out searching for her or acting like she's a traitor for the most part. Abby is shown in the game to not be able to sleep at night without dreaming of what happened at the hospital. And we only see her sleep at night successfully after she does what she does to Joel. And I think this is important because these types of small details are giving us like insight on why Abby was able to train so hard. Her motivation is deep. Her motivation is deep within her psyche. She can't sleep. And if she does sleep, she's dreaming about what happened. And it doesn't stop until she does what she does. And so this is it really kind of takes away from Abby's character, why she is so motivated to go get Joel and why she's able to go get him in general. It also messes up the plot near the end of the game. Now, I don't know what they're going to do because this is obviously going to come out in season 3 if you've been watching the pacing of the episodes, and we only have one episode left. We are not going to get to the end of the game by the end of season 2. So again, I don't know what's going to happen at the end of season 3, but I'm pretty sure it's going to mess up the plot. At the end of the game, Abby goes to California to look for the Fireflies, the remainder of the Fireflies. On her way there, she encounters a crew called the Rattlers who take her, imprison her, and in that imprisonment, they're starved. And we figure, we don't get an actual date, but we figure she's there for weeks to months on end. By the time Ellie finds her, pretty much crucified on a beach, she had been starved for a while. There is a distinct difference in Abby's appearance between Abby before California and Abby when we see her again after California. She lost like maybe half her muscle mass, which is why Abby and Ellie are then able to fight hand to hand, shinobi combat style, at the end of the game. Otherwise, Ellie would never even attempt that. Like, let's be real. You think Ellie was gonna fight Abby at original build? No, that would be stupid, okay? So, what's gonna happen there? What are we gonna do with the Rattlers? On top of this, I just want to bring up how important Abby's build and just looks overall were so important to not only me, but to a lot of other feminine people who played this game. Abby was one of the first times that a woman was allowed in media to not be skinny, but also not be the butt end of a joke. Every time that we see a woman appear larger in some sort of media, it's because she has to be the ugly friend. There has to be some jokes about how she's so funny and yada yada, she's a good friend. This didn't happen with Abby. Abby was literally only treated with respect. Even up to her being caught by the Rattlers, Ellie finds the Rattlers herself, and he explains, or he says to her, you're looking for the girl built like an ox. That stuck with me for so long, because yes, Abby was never disrespected, ever, for her size. And we don't get to see women like Abby exist without that disrespect. So it's just very, not only detrimental to her plot, her character, but also I feel like it's kind of like, it's heartbreaking. I was heartbroken. I was so excited to see Abby on TV. And I mean Abby, like big buff Abby. That's what I wanted. And there's so many other people who feel the same way, including all of the people that I talked to in formulating this video essay. I just think it's a major loss for the impact it had on the broader feminine audience who loves the series. It's really upsetting. The thing that I don't understand is some people were saying that the actress who was picked to play Abby was too pretty. Abby is pretty. Yeah, I don't know why that was even brought up. I think Abby is gorgeous. Yes, you can be muscular and gorgeous. And honestly, I think, you know, if the actress was unable to get that large, which totally understand, like that took years of dedication. Even putting her in a suit, I think would have been just fine. She definitely is a beautiful girl. And I definitely think that if she was in like a muscular suit, she like absolutely would have just, you know what I mean? That's what I had to say about Abby. I do think it's important. And I did want to bring that up just because like, it really is a little heartbreaking. It really is a little upsetting. I do want to move on to the appearance of Bella Ramsey, but not in the way that you think. Okay, everyone hold your horses. This is editing son real quickly. In this next clip, when I'm talking about the appearance of Bella Ramsey, I do use the pronouns of she, her, which is not in intentions to misgender Bella Ramsey. It was because I'm talking about the character of Ellie, who does use she, her pronouns, and I did not want to leave any room for people to assume or imply that I was trying to misgender Bella Ramsey, because we don't do that in this household. We respect them. Okay, thank you. I just think she's very youthful in the face. I don't know how else to say that. She's just extremely youthful in the face. I think that when I looked back, and actually after watching episode 6, when we look back or they're showing flashbacks to Ellie in the first season, they're kind of like angled up and pointing down at her just to kind of make her look shorter. And I feel like that's like the only thing that makes her look a little younger, is kind of using camera angles to make her look smaller, literally smaller. I just don't think she looks aged up at all. I think she looks exactly the same, but with a tattoo. And one design choice that I thought was kind of interesting was that they gave Ellie long hair, versus in the game, Ellie cuts her hair off. I don't know if they cut it off. It was always up, and then in the next game is down, and it's about my length. And I feel like even just cutting her hair to the Ellie appropriate canon hair length would have done a little bit better. Maybe adding a fake scar to her face or something. She just has a very youthful appearance. That's all I have to say. Again, if you start going on these rants that I just keep seeing everywhere else on social media, I'm just asking everybody who is responsible and able to conduct themselves like an adult, please ignore those comments. Okay, don't feed them. Don't give them the time of day. So let's start with episode 1. Now, I did also grab ratings for each episode from seriesgraph.com. It is literally a website that has season by season, episode by episode, the ratings for each episode. Episode 1, Future Days, got a 7.4 compared to season 1, where it received a 9.1 for the pilot episode. I was kind of sad that they did not use the song in this episode, considering it's literally named after the song, and I will actually come back to that in episode 5. I personally didn't think episode 1 was that bad. In my personal opinion, I think it could have got like a 8.3 to 8.5. That's my personal rating. There were only 2 things that made me scratch my head a little bit. The water pipes being full of like a fungus network. I actually don't mind this addition to the story at all. What I do mind is the fact that we haven't built on it at all yet. We have one more episode this season, and we have yet to like, hey, why are they showing us multiple times over that there's a fungus network in the pipes? And another thing that I kind of like scratched my head at was Joel seeing a therapist. Again, I actually like this idea, and I think it was a good job in terms of world building and showing more realism in the characters, more humanity, and the fact that they're actually trying to build a society and a community where people are not only surviving, but trying to better themselves. Not just rebuild, but regain their humanity. What I had written about why I didn't exactly like that actually becomes more explained in episode 6. I will kind of save why I didn't like that, because we did get an explanation in episode 6. I just want to say that I think, again, the pacing was a little slow, which is weird because in other parts of this show, the pacing's a little fast, and we'll get to that when we get there, but the pacing is honestly a little inconsistent. And again, this isn't something that I have just brought up, but when I say I'm talking to my friends, again, these are all people who have played the games. I'm bouncing ideas between like 5 or 6 other people. Again, it gets to a point where we who have played both games were honestly confused by the pacing multiple times. So this is one of those times where the pacing confused me. Moving on, part of me doesn't mind that Tommy and Maria have a child, but at the same time, in what's going to be a bigger topic of discussion, it's only used to change Tommy's character in a way I think is too far from the game. They're doing a good job again in world building and showing the people of Jackson are actually creating a real community and trying to build a future and move on from everything that's going on, that they feel safe enough to continue having children and stuff. And I do enjoy that. It just, the way that it seems to get used against Tommy's character rubs me the wrong way. Once we get through the episodes, I will be dissecting Tommy's character again. So keep that in mind. The introduction to stalkers, though, I have to say, in episode 1 was really good. It gave me anxiety. It creeped me out. It made me think of encountering one for the first time in the game. But it also shows something that becomes super redundant in this season of TV, which is Ellie being bit. And I'll get more into that when we get to episode 5. But, like, yeah, girl, why did you have to get bit? I still don't understand. I'm not gonna lie. That I don't have a conclusion for by the end of this video. But yeah, we're overdoing that in this season of TV. I'm just gonna put that out there, okay? Let's move on to episode 2, Through the Valley. And they did actually use the song in this episode, and I did enjoy that because I am obsessed with the Ashley Johnson version of this song. So I'm super, super happy that it did play. This episode got a 9.3, which is actually higher than season 1's episode 2, which got a 9.0. And this is where the minor changes that didn't really bother me, but more so had me questioning, start to bother me. This is the episode that made me start to lose hope in this season of TV. Some of these changes are vital to the story. So let me start on a positive note and say that I think episode 2 was a direct response to the fan complaint from season 1 that generally it was lacking action and infected. The fight scene and the attack on Jackson is not part of the game series. I had anxiety the whole time, and I really enjoyed that just because, you know, it is, I don't want to say boring, but it's not as exciting when you know everything that's going to happen. And so I think that the attack on Jackson was a really cool addition to the show. You know, we didn't kill any major characters or anything where they shouldn't have been, but, you know, it was action-packed. I had anxiety. I already knew what was going to happen in episode 2 based on where we were in the game, but I still had something like making me on the edge of my seat because I did not know what was going on with the attack on Jackson. And I think that it was a really good combat to the general complaint from season 1 that it was lacking infected in action. But this is where they start to veer off of the plot in a way that changes the story. So when going out on patrol, the route partners were changed. And I don't necessarily understand why. A little bit, but not entirely. So, with that being said, they left Tommy at Jackson so Tommy could kind of take charge of this attack that happens from the infected. Cool. But on patrol, Ellie and Dena are supposed to go to Eugene's garage, Eugene's whatever the heck you want to call it. In the game, Tommy and Joel are on patrol together. But again, we left Tommy at Jackson to deal with this attack. And that's fine. They just put Jesse out instead of Tommy. Not only that, they put Ellie and Jesse to go to Eugene's. They put Dena and Joel to go out on their route. Now, this bothers me a little bit because Ellie and Dena are supposed to go to Eugene's, and they have a very special scene together at Eugene's. And there's kind of no reason to separate them. I cannot find a reason that the TV show separated them. And what it did was it took from us that solidifying love scene that let us know that there is more going on between Ellie and Dena than just a little kiss. There's feelings there. It wasn't just a mistake. But we don't get that. We don't get that. Instead, we have Ellie and Jesse there while Dena and Joel save Abby and look for shelter to survive the storm. Abby convinces them to go to the cabin, and they do so. They drug Dena, and they do what they were there to do while she is knocked out. I guess I just really don't understand, because I don't understand why we changed the pacing of this relationship here. I also don't really like that at this point now, Ellie and Dena went to Seattle together because they're together. Dena said, if you're going, I'm going with you. That's not what happened in the show. And I feel like their relationship is super important to the overall story. And it's like a big piece of the tone and the lesson of the story of The Last of Us 2. I also think that this love scene between Ellie and Dena did a really good job at showcasing how in the setting of the end of the world or the apocalypse that anything could happen at any time. We have a really, really positive scene going on. Ellie and Dena, they have a moment to themselves. They get to, do their thing. Well, literally before they could even get dressed in the game, Jesse barges in and is like, Tommy and Joel haven't responded. It's building the experience of how fucking fast something can change in the end of the world. How one moment you think everything is fine and dandy, because maybe for you it is fine and dandy, but the next moment it's not. And I really enjoyed that part of the game where we were like, oh, we're finally having a good moment, and that good moment is not actually a good moment. It kind of reinforced that any good moment can become a bad moment in 2 seconds. Moving on to episode 3, titled The Path, it received a 7.0 instead of season 1's 8.0 for their 3rd episode. Like a lot of the episodes in this season, I have the same kind of opening statement that it's a good episode of TV, but it's not a good adaptation. And that's something that kind of repeats itself throughout this entire season. This episode is where my confusion about some of the smaller changes turned into straight up anger. Starting on a lighter note again, because I like to be a little positive, this episode is a really good depiction of grief for someone like Ellie. The already traumatized young woman who can get through anything, doesn't show her emotions. It's kind of really spot on. The conversation with the therapist before she's allowed to leave the hospital is spot on as well. If she doesn't want you to know, you're not going to know. And kind of like one of those people who moves in silence, like the G in lasagna. No, but going into the house and looking at her completely empty bedroom, kind of in regret of moving to the garage, and then slowly venturing into Joel's room to cry into his jacket after looking at his stuff. It's extremely comforting and realistic to somebody who has grieved my own losses, kind of in the same way, because we almost sort of has a similar personality type. Like I said, I found a lot of comfort in Ellie's character since the first season, or the first game rather, of The Last of Us, and I found her to be really relatable in her grief, even down to the fact that she wiped her tears and hid her emotions when Dena came in, because you especially cannot be weak in front of people that you love or care about, because Ellie also kind of takes this from Joel. She is like the protector, and if you're the protector, you kind of cannot be weak in front of the people that you love the most, that you would want to protect. So I feel like there was really good depictions of grief for somebody with Ellie's personality type. I do want to say that. The time differences from the game versus the TV show don't seem too dramatic from a glance. Instead of immediately leaving Jackson to get revenge, Ellie spends a couple months in the hospital to recover. At a glance, again, this doesn't seem like a major change in any sort of way, but going forward in the episode, it makes changes to Dena's character that I will get into in its own section after we go over each episode, like I said with Tommy as well. The main annoyance of this episode, and not just for myself, but for all of the game fans I have been having conversations with, is changes to Tommy's character, which is also why there's going to be a section about that at the end. Tommy in the game is that dude. Okay, not to take the saying from Cub Scouts, but Tommy's that dude. Like, he's out for revenge and he's gonna get it. He's reverted back to his old ways. And I mean the ways that made Joel confident in leaving Ellie with him back in season 1. He leaves for Seattle before anyone else, and he doesn't care about anyone else's opinion. And it even causes issues in his marriage. Canon to the game. But in this episode, after leaving the hospital months later, when Ellie and Dena approach Tommy about the information of the group and their location, Tommy wants to hold a town meeting. He's not fired up, and he's ready to abide by whatever the vote of the council meeting is. Who is that? That's not Tommy. What are you talking about? Going in order of the episode, I do have to say that I enjoyed the introduction to the Seraphites. It portrays them almost as peaceful people who are just trying to stay safe and highlights the brutal ways of the wolves. In this episode, we also learn that Jesse is now on the council, giving Jesse more importance to the community than he had in the game. And this also brings up some red flags for me, which again, I will be going over once all the games are covered, or episodes are covered rather. The rest of the episode, after Ellie and Dena sneak out to go on their trip to Seattle, despite the council vote not going in their favor, and what me and my friends call the revenge tour. It's a montage of travel across the country after receiving help from Seth, by the way, which I actually did like that addition to the show, something that does not happen in the game. I don't know. It's not like an apology and it doesn't make everything better, but I do like that addition. We get to a night scene in the tent while they are camping and making their way across the country. And if I wasn't already frustrated with the show and some of the things they were changing, this is honestly where I started watching each episode on Sunday with anger. Instead of being excited, I kind of started watching like, okay, let's see what they're going to mess up this time, because that's generally how I felt at this moment in time. Dena and Ellie are having conversations about the kiss at New Year's Eve, where Dena is kind of playing it off that it was nothing. She was really high. They go back and forth about it, and Dena is also ruminating on Jesse, and asking Ellie if he seems sad all the time to her as well. Dena says that she hopes that that's kind of just part of his character and who he is deep down, because if it's not, that means it's her. That's all I'm going to say on that for now, because like I said, I have a whole section about Dena's character afterwards, but I did want to bring that up just because I do want to highlight how each episode I was kind of giving it the benefit of the doubt, and then there was always something that made me like, you know what I mean? Episode 3 concludes with Ellie and Dena going to Seattle and us seeing the WLF on camera for the first time, and they are infinitely more organized than they are in the game. The first time that we see them in the game, they're in a room full of body bags that we are presuming was done by Tommy before we even get to Seattle. Again, the man was on a mission and they took that from him, which is just disrespectful if you ask me. Episode 4, titled Day 1, we get a 6.3 versus the season 1 4th episode, we got an 8.3. The episode starts off with a cameo from Josh Peck, which I recognized his voice instantly, as I'm sure many people did who grew up on Nickelodeon. In his scene, it's giving us a slight intro into Isaac leaving and then starting the WLF. I'm going to assume that the cameo was probably supposed to boost ratings, but that did not work out, as so many other things are lacking in this adaptation that it just did not matter. Ellie and Dena are venturing around Seattle, true to game fashion. In the TV show, we see Dena find and take pregnancy tests, which is something we don't see in the game. we don't know that Dena is pregnant in the game until she literally just tells Ellie that she's pregnant. So that's something that, they lead on a little bit early in the TV show. I don't really mind it. After a little looking around, we do go back to Isaac, and he is torturing a Seraphite. It definitely helps build up his menacing character and emphasizes how even his own soldiers fear him. I just couldn't get past the PP on my screen. Why is there a PP on my screen? Like, I get it that, he's torturing him and he's trying to dehumanize him by taking his clothes. I don't want to see PP on my screen. I'm tired of seeing PP on my screen. And why is it always PP? I think I Snapchatted a couple of my friends at this point and was like, yo, why is there a PP on our screen? And everybody kind of responded in distaste. You could just allude to him being unclothed. I don't want to see it. I don't think many people wanted to see it, but after being visually assaulted, we move on to Ellie and Dena finding the TV station where the WLF come in and see their people strung up and sacrificed, is what we'll call it, in Seraphite fashion, which causes them to look around, and a fight chase scene breaks out between them and our protagonists, which lead them into the train station, where I have my next set of grievances. In the game, this is all correct, although the pacing of the show, again, is generally like back and forth between too slow and too fast, that not only myself, but my friends also wondered, is this the way that it happened in the game? I had to go back and I replayed game 2 up into the birthday flashback scene just to check and verify. But yes, that is the way it happens in the game, but it seems a lot slower in the game for a couple of reasons. In the game, in the station, Ellie and Dena sneak their way around the WLF while they fight the horde that they end up running from in the TV series. While doing so, they end up in the ceiling. There's like grates in the ceiling. They are crawling and looking down on the WLF, and where they find their first shambler. Now, going back to the main grievance of season 1, it's that there's a lack of infected and action. They did a really good job trying to combat that with episode 2, but now we don't get introduced to shamblers. In fact, even after episode 6, now that we have passed that, we have not seen a shambler. And the reason that the pacing is kind of off in this is because they watch the WLF fight a shambler, which causes them to crawl around in the ceiling, come down at a different point, and then you have to sneak around a series of like 4, 5, 6 shamblers yourself, or fight them if you're brave enough. And again, it makes the pacing seem off. So when they do run out of the station, there's a gnarly chase scene on the TV show. And in doing so, instead of Ellie cracking her mask before we get to safety in the theater, Ellie kind of takes a bite for Dena. And then when they get into the theater, Dena holds a gun to Ellie for hours, or what we assume to be hours. While Ellie tells Dena nothing's going to happen, she's going to be okay because she's immune, Dena does not buy this. I don't blame her. And Ellie says, okay, well, I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to wake up perfectly fine and everything will be okay. We kind of see Ellie lay down and then we see Ellie wake up. And when Ellie wakes up, Dena, like the bolden survivor that she is in the show, is still right on Ellie. I don't like this at all because it was so unnatural, but she wakes up, Dena's still on her, and Dena then blurts out she's pregnant, and they spontaneously do the deed. It's got to be one of the cringiest scenes like that I have ever seen. It's not only not true to the game, but it's rushed, it's forced, it's awkward. I can't find a good descriptor besides it's terrible. And then when you compare it to the one in the game, it makes me very mad because, again, there was no reason to split them up from going to Eugene's. I think that the love scene in the game was a lot less gazy. I think it was a lot less awkward. It was very much more natural. The one in the show is just... I was cringing. I think the last, like, what, 10, it was there like 10 minutes after that, I was watching the show again. The way that the scene also does bother me as well, go down bothers me as well. The way that it's Ellie on Dena. And you'll find out why when I go through Dena's character at the end of me going through the episodes, and I'm sure you'll pick up and understand what I mean. But yes, they wake up in the morning and they happily discuss Dena's pregnancy. And Ellie says, "I'm going to be a dad," which has turned into so many memes. I don't even blame them, because that was so bad. Ellie, you're a burden now. Williams would never. I'm just fucking saying. Like, really? How do we go from, well, you're a burden now, aren't you, to, I'm going to be a dad? That's not. I missed my mouth. You didn't see that. That's not. Come on now. Why are they making everything so positive in the show? It ruins the entire theme and plot of the original story. Like, I just want to remind y'all that The Last of Us 2 is a game about grief, revenge, and how you can so easily be consumed by those two things that you lose everything to it. Part of that is Ellie's cold responses to Dena, something that we know would not happen if Joel was still alive and they were in a different part of life. It's the fact that they are on Ellie's revenge tour and she's grieving that she would be so cold to Dena. It just, you're changing the entire tone. Okay? Let me just say that. Episode 5, titled Fear Her Love, received a 7.5 versus Season 1's Episode 5 with a 9.4. Are you catching the trend that I'm putting down so far? At this point, I'm watching every episode expecting to be mad. But somehow I'm getting more irritated than I was even expecting. We start this episode with the wolves reintroducing the idea of spores into the show. I have no problem with this in theory, but more so in practice. Circling back to the topic of Ellie being bit way too often and it being extremely overdone at this point, you introduce spores the episode after she gets bit in front of Dena, which gives us a way cringier scene than what could have been. Had Dena seen Ellie not choke on spores like she does in the game, would automatically make her believe that Ellie is immune because she's not choking on spores. Instead, we have that extremely cringe scene because Ellie got bit, so now we have to wait. Because once you're infected, you have a time limit, before you turn. I now have to ask, what was the point of removing spores? It didn't really change much of anything in terms of Season 1 and up into the point besides this cringe scene we just had the last episode. But so why did we do it? Because we have to reintroduce it. It's vital to a lot of the plot points in Season 2. So what? I just don't understand why we did that then. And if we were gonna reintroduce it, I just feel like it was terrible timing and fashion because you already kind of really butchered Dena finding out that Ellie's immune. And then you literally reintroduce it the next episode. That just blows my mind a little bit. Ellie and Dena have a conversation the morning after this scene, which again, I will dissect in greater detail in Dena's section. But we then find Dena working out on figuring out the WLF's roots and routine while listening to a walkie-talkie they got off of a dead wolf in the TV station. Again, this is something they made wholesome and positive, which is completely changing the tone and theme of the greater storyline. Ellie is thanking Dena for doing so and complimenting how smart she is for being able to triangulate, when in reality, they wake up the next morning and Ellie finds Dena puking into a trash can, exhausted because she hasn't slept yet, because Ellie called her a burden. Ellie strolls into the auditorium where she finds a guitar and plays 2 lines of If I Ever Were to Lose You. And again, this is something that I feel like the pacing, or I don't even know if the right word is pacing, but the timeline could have been a little bit better, because at this point that means nothing to TV viewers. People who have not played the game and are just watching the TV show, they don't get the heartstring pulled the way us game fans did, because they don't know the importance of that song. This does get changed. Like I said, I wrote this before episode 6 came out, and I am reading it after episode 6 came out. I just think that even so, it would have had more emotional effect had they known that Joel sang her that song previously. This seems kind of nitpicky, like some of these complaints, but again, I want to emphasize that the greater issue with season 2 is that there are so many little changes that they have snowballed into like a major change. It's kind of like when you miss so many details that now it becomes a problem. After this, Ellie and Dena set out to go to the hospital together to find Nora. And at this point in the game, since Dena is pregnant, she does not join Ellie. Whereas in this TV show, she does, which leads to what I think are some pretty cringe conversations. In the game, these conversations flow much better, and they are occurring on the way to Seattle while Dena is talking Ellie's ear off. Ellie is also asking questions back to Dena. Whereas in this show, Ellie kind of has no interest in getting to know more about Dena, which is kind of rude to me. Like, have you ever had a conversation with somebody where you'll be like trying to get to know them and you'll be asking them like, so what's your favorite color? And then they'll be like, red. Okay, so what's your favorite food? Tacos. That makes me not want to talk to you ever again, because I feel like you do not care about my answers to the question. And yes, that seems like small, but like, you don't even want to know my favorite color back. Like, that's rude. And that's kind of what they're making Ellie give in the TV show, which doesn't really make sense because they have made her still like the fun, playful person that she is in the first game, but also like, what, she doesn't want to know anything about Dena? Like, that doesn't make sense. If she's grieving so bad that she's become cold and calloused, I would understand. But they literally did not take her personality from her the way they do in the game. And she doesn't want to know about Dena. Like, that just doesn't, like, the 2 + 2 is not equaling 4. It's equaling 3. And, like, that doesn't make sense to me. This leads us to the conversation between Ellie and Dena, where Dena tells Ellie about her first yeetus deletus while living place to place with her mom and sister. Naturally in the game, this is in response to Ellie asking questions back. If you remember, on their way to Seattle, Dena had asked Ellie who the first person she yeetus deletus was. It didn't flow naturally because Ellie isn't asking her any questions back. So instead, on the way to this building they have to creep through to get to the hospital, Dena, in a very cringe fashion, tells this story. You ever seen those like TikToks or those skits where the person's like making fun of the friend that thinks they're the main character? That is exactly how Dena is giving off these lines here. Like, she is storming ahead at Ellie. She has so much attitude. She's like, yeah, well, when I was with my mom, I wanted to go out and like, girl, you are literally in enemy territory outside, like having a whole play. It's kind of super cheap, and like it's giving not done in a professional setting, if that makes sense. Like it's very much like the skits on the Matter on TikTok or anywhere that you would see one like that. On their way to the hospital, they have to go through again that long building that I referenced that is unguarded based on Dena's calculations. This leads to Ellie making Dena lock herself in a cage and Ellie trying to fight off all the stalkers outside of the cage since she can get bit. And she does. Multiple times. They both almost get devoured as the stalkers are ripping the wiring off the cage. They are also like eating Ellie alive until an early appearance from Jesse where he shoots like a madman to save them and they all run back out the building from the way they came and into the park because now all of the wolves heard those shots and are on their tails. The wolves don't follow them into the park though, as it's Seraphite territory, so the crew thinks they're safe until they run into the Seraphites doing what we will call a ritual on a captured wolf, and out of nowhere, Dena is shot in the leg with an arrow. Jesse grabs Dena and runs out of the park as Ellie distracts the Seraphites so that they could get away. And in doing so, she sees the hospital in the distance and decides to continue on alone. This isn't canon to the game. This entire part of the game, Ellie was already alone. Dena doesn't get shot, and Jesse does not yet appear. His demeanor in the game is much friendlier, and he is more so a concerned friend who wanted to help. and join their cause after finding out they had snuck out of Jackson. But in the show, he's much more an angry council member / superior who snuck away with Tommy to find them and bring them back to Jackson. These subtle changes in themselves had made me theorize something about Jesse's character that I'll be discussing again shortly. Ellie heads to the hospital where Nora chase scene does occur. Spores were reintroduced, and this was mandatory for this scene because Nora, who becomes cornered, runs down to the floor where they find spores for the first time because she's attempting to kill herself and Ellie as a final gotcha, but instead she just gets herself and realizes Ellie is the immune girl. Even down to the metal pipe scene is slightly different, again in ways I feel change the entire tone of the story. In the game, Ellie is already angry, and they even removed her "I can make it quick" or "I can make it so much worse" line in the TV show. In the game, she's ready to torture Nora in the way that Joel used to torture people. In the TV show, you can kind of see Ellie's frustration for the first time build more and more as Nora is not giving her answers. And then she goes ahead and starts whacking her. And she's been less angry and more calm and still her playful 14-year-old self, more so with like hints of anger and grief, and it's not so much consuming her like it does in the game, which I think is very important to the theme and the story. Now that we covered episode 1 through 5, I did not write anything for episode 6. I was going to get on here and look directly into the camera and give you my thoughts and ideas, which was going to be extremely easy, or so I thought. I actually thought reading what I wrote was going to be easy in general, but this has actually proven to be a little more difficult than usual. So thanks for hanging in there if you have so far. I'm actually really shocked. According to Series Graph, episode 6 received a 6.7. That is crazy. Versus season 1's 8.8. I have no words for that. Honestly, the only episode I thought besides 6 that was good was 2. I thought episode 6 was the second good episode of the entire series so far. So it kind of blows my mind that it received a 6.7 or so, says Series Graph, which it is Tuesday. So, I mean, it's only been out for like 48 hours, if that. I thought it was beautiful. It was the first episode this season that made me cry. I thought the birthday flashbacks were beautiful. As much as I don't like the pacing of Future Days only coming out in episode 6 when Ellie kind of referenced it in episode 5, and the title of the first episode was Future Days. I thought it was a cute little I thought it was a cute little inclusion to it being a birthday thing. He made her the guitar. He played her that song on that guitar. I thought that was cute. I think going through each of the birthdays was pretty cute. I think showing how close they were when they got to Jackson, and then the deterioration, kind of the older and older they got. I thought that was super realistic. I thought that showed humanity and the problems or the troubles, the hardships of being a parent, especially to somebody that's not actually your child. Porch scene had me in tears. Okay, the porch scene I think was even better than the porch scene in the game. I am in between on how I feel about the Eugene thing. I'm not mad at it. I don't think it's a bad addition. I just also kind of really liked the solo adventure of Ellie going back to the hospital and finding the details about what happened, and that's why she distrusts Joel. I feel like they could have incorporated both, but at the same time, maybe they couldn't. Again, that's why I'm kind of in between, because how did Ellie get out to the hospital in Salt Lake in the game? I mean, Joel came behind her. He figured out she left. But how'd she do that? And I guess with what they did to her character in the TV show, she would not be able to get to Salt Lake by herself because she was not going to get to Seattle without Dena's help. So, I mean, overall, I thought season or episode 6 of season 2 was like the best episode so far. I think it went 6-2, bleh. And I'm not the only person that thinks it goes bleh. If you've noticed, all of our ratings have been 7s and below, besides episode 2, which there was only one that was in the 7s in season 1. That would be episode 7. It got a 7.3. So that's what I want to say about episode 6. I don't think there's really anything to add other than that. There's nothing really to dissect. I think it was beautiful. I think it could have been paced a little different, or maybe just in the, a little different, or maybe the song could have been in episode 1 and something else could have happened in the birthday things. But other than that, I mean, I really think it's beautiful. I'm shocked that it received the rating that it received. But now that we have covered all of the episodes so far, I want to talk about a couple things I've mentioned in greater detail. And I want to start with the nerfing of characters, in a sense. In the game, Ellie gets through that building of stalkers. She outsmarts them with bricks, bottles, and other distractions. And it is a harder part of the game. I'm pretty sure many people remember being frustrated at that, but she does in fact get through. Nerfing the characters really only fits the narrative in this show because they have paced and changed so many minor details that she needed to not make it through that building because Dena wasn't with her at the hospital or in the park. So they kind of had to make her get hit by an arrow to make sure Ellie was alone again. And part of that is making sure that they don't get through that building so that Jesse has to come in and it jumbles everything. I think this takes away from the character building of her being a hardened survivor. And those moments were such a good callback to the techniques that she learned from Joel being taught as a teenager and running around the country with him. Instead, it kind of makes her more human, like just a regular human who's kind of been softened and cushioned by her time of living in a safe community. And when we think back to what I said about how the issue is that there's so many minor little changes to details that it kind of becomes one larger problem, I really feel this is one of them, because we lost a lot of the essence in Ellie's character as someone who was born after the world ended and traveled the country and was raised, at least the last 4 years of her life, by a hardened smuggler who is feared throughout the remaining world. She's now just a girl. She's just a girl. Not so much carrying around the essence of Joel anymore, which I think is really sad because carrying around Joel's essence is how he lives on because he is no longer physically with us. Moving on to Tommy's character, Tommy was absolutely ripped of his character, his anger, his bloodlust. Essentially, I feel like he was nerfed. I don't know why. Being nerfed is bound to cause more issues in this story, in my opinion. I also just kind of think it's disrespectful to the man and all the harm he had done in the game. Tommy, like Joel, was feared. He was a Firefly. He was a veteran of the army, and these are reasons that Joel was confident in leaving Ellie with him to get to the Fireflies before Tommy refused in Game 1, Season 1. Like I mentioned earlier, Tommy was first to leave in the game. He got to Seattle before anybody else, and we see how many people he dropped before we got there, as the wolves are literally having a discussion about not knowing what to do with all of the body bags that are around them. He was a menace. Okay, he had them scared for their lives before they even knew if he was alone or with other people. They were questioning if it was a group of people. Okay, that's how much damage Tommy was doing out there. The anger is what drives him at the end of the game to go to the farm and give Ellie the information about Abby's California whereabouts. His anger is what drove him to even seek out that information. And this is all vital to the plot because this is the last thing that pushes Ellie to leave Dena in the middle of the night without saying anything because she's going to get that job done. The Tommy that we see in the show is entirely different, which makes me worry on how we're going to get this outcome. The outcome is canon, and it's what makes Ellie go to California and come to the realization that going all the way out there and finishing the job won't change anything before returning home and realizing she's now faced with her biggest fear, ending up all alone. Let's get into what is probably the most hurtful for me, and that's Dena's character and the terrible bisexual representation that comes from butchering Dena's character. This one really hurts my heart, because Dena is one of my favorite characters in the game. When Ellie left her in the middle of the night, I shed real tears. Dena did not deserve that. To this day, when people ask, like, what part of gaming made you cry? I say when Ellie left Dena in the middle of the fucking night. Like, that's not going to change. I love them together, despite all the emotional labor that Ellie required from her and knowing how exhausting it could be to be that caretaker in that type of dynamic of relationship. I loved them. In the show so far, I don't really like her, and I feel bad for saying that as it's not really her fault, but they have butchered my girl. Butchered. In some ways, they tried to make her cooler, like how resourceful she is, how much of a survivor they made her, how smart she is in planning the trip, and how she keeps them safe and is teaching Ellie at the same time, tips, tricks, and techniques on staying safe while they are out in Seattle. But these things really get outshined by the multitude of negativities that they give her. I want to start off with Dena bouncing between Ellie and Jesse. In the game, this is not canon. And you can argue that Dena left Jesse and then showed interest in Ellie relatively quickly, and I really can't dispute that. The facts are the facts. She found out she was pregnant on the trip with Ellie, meaning it must have been right before they did kiss at that dance. And if that's too quick for you, that's fine. Like I said, I can't argue that. But I feel like that is a lot different than the way they handled it in the show. I feel like it's much more problematic for her to have been bouncing around between the two due to the show's pacing. While Ellie's in the hospital recovering after episode 2 and the incident with Joel, Dena was messing around with Jesse again. She admits this in that god-awful tent scene when they were traveling. Myself and others have been having these discussions, and we don't feel that fits her canon character. Like, I don't think that game Dena would do that. I don't think I don't want to call it cheating because they weren't together, but it doesn't fit her character. This brings me back to the tent discussion because Dena tries to play it off like that night she was just really high and there was no real feelings or meanings behind the kiss and that she doesn't like girls. And this really, really, really made me upset because Dena doesn't show any type of denial in herself in the game, which is then reinforced after the really bad love scene in the theater. Dena tells Ellie in that discussion the next morning that her mom didn't want her to like girls, so she essentially repressed it. And I feel like this is really unnecessary inclusion in the show and doesn't really build any character for her, especially because they removed the entire mosque section of Seattle Day 1. Had they kept that in and had the conversation about Dena being Jewish and maybe that her mom was trying to be as orthodox as possible as some kind of like coping mechanism in the remains of the world because it made her feel some normalcy, I could probably understand it. But they literally also took that from her. They scrapped it entirely, which really upsets me because I loved that Dena was Jewish. I love that the series shows all different types of representation across various groups of people, and they took that from her. This kind of representation of bisexual people really was not needed or helpful. It's no mystery that bisexual people are often labeled as confused and or cheaters, and that's kind of literally what they gave her. The show gave us a bisexual girl who seemed to be repressed until she experiences a lesbian that makes her not so confused, and in doing so, she was bouncing around between Jesse and Ellie, and results in how she finds out that she is pregnant on their trip to Seattle. That's the opposite of the representation we need for bisexual people in the media. It only reinforced negative stereotypes that already exist day to day and bisexual people face on a regular basis. Besides all of this, Dena feels like an afterthought. From the fact that Ellie doesn't ask her any of those questions back to her essentially kind of being plot armor for how Ellie is going to sneak out of Jackson, and how it kind of all left her to deliver her lines in a really cringe way that seems like the friend that thinks they're the main character. She seems really unnatural. I'm really upset by this. Like, Dena was my favorite character in the game, besides our two protagonists, Abby and Ellie. So it's very upsetting. Very upsetting what kind of representation they're giving bisexual people, considering all the really good representation up until this point. A quick question about Jesse. So like I said multiple times, like they kind of have changed a couple things about Jesse, and it's making me like wonder a little bit of things. Not that he doesn't deserve it, because he does, if you ask me. The show spends a lot of time building him up as an important council member of the community, and when we do see him, he's often leading or helping to like build. And then once he's deemed council and he comes to Seattle, again, it's not a friendly tone. It's in a way of like a superior being upset with you, and that's not how it goes in the game. That isn't so much a complaint, because again, I do think he deserves it. I think Jesse deserved more story. But now that I'm getting more story and the way that it's headed, it's making me wonder what the trickle-down effect is going to be, because all these minor detail changes in the show aren't just minor detail changes. Like, they kind of come back around to bite us in the ass, or they come back around in some fashion. So why are we making him more important than he is in the game? Is it to compensate for the changing of the tone and the entirety of the story so far? As in, we're making him more important so that his death is more impactful to the community as a whole, rather than in the game, it just kind of makes everything more real to Ellie, that her decisions and actions on this revenge tour don't just affect her and Dena. Like, if they get hurt or die, it's going to affect other people, and she finally sees that in real time right in front of her eyes? Or is it to give him some sort of plot armor so that they can save him, so when Dena leaves Ellie or I guess she does leave Ellie, when Ellie leaves Dena, which makes Dena leave Ellie, she has someone to go back to in a terrible fashion, which in the game would not match her character, but since she was already bouncing between the two, would match her character. It just makes me ponder a little bit. All in all, not only in my personal opinion, but also shown by the lower ratings that seem to just keep creeping down. And when talking with other game fans about how season 2 is going so far, it's lacking. A multitude of smaller changes have turned this entire thing into a completely different story so far. What's canonly a deep and dark journey into the depths of how revenge, grief, and anger can take absolutely everything from you, and how completing the cycle of revenge doesn't actually do or change anything, especially the feelings of pain that you have inside. This just feels like a slightly sad journey where no one is consumed by these negative emotions. Nothing feels like the end of the world unless we accomplish this mission, which is what happened to Ellie. She lost her world and is making the people responsible for it pay. We aren't watching Ellie lose her funny, quirky self into being a calm and nonchalant and often cold husk of who she was. We aren't watching Tommy go on a slip and slide mission that heightens the importance of finding him so we don't lose him too, our last family member left. The overwhelmingly positive tone and lack of attention to detail that we saw in the first season of The Last of Us has accumulated into bad representation, messed up pacing, and a horde of disgruntled fans who are overwhelmingly caught off guard because season 1 was so expertly done. If you made it to the end of this video, not only a very big thank you, but congratulations as well. When I first started this project, I did not expect it to be this long at all. I knew I had a lot to say, but I myself am even overwhelmed by how long this has gotten. I really do want to hear your opinions as game fans on the takes I had, and or anything you think I missed or should have included. As for any TV only fans who watch this despite the spoiler warning, please let me know what you think of what I have to say in general, now that you have gotten these little bits of information and backstory that I included in here. I really do encourage you to watch the game here on YouTube if you don't want to play it, or you're incapable of playing it for whatever reason, because I do find it to be a far superior story. If you have any personal theories on anything I brought up, like what you think will happen with Jesse, please share them with me, as well as any theories that you have in general. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day or night until I see you again. Love, Sen.